Please, I just need a moment to rest. I didn't mean to be in anyone's way. The elderly woman's trembling voice cinched as she sat on the polished marble floor of the luxury shopping mall, her worn brown coat pooling around her like a plea for invisibility. Two well-dressed women stood above her, their voices sharp with disdain. "This isn't a homeless shelter," one sneered, her designer handbag swinging as she gestured dismissively. "Security should remove people like you." "I'm not homeless," the elderly woman whispered, clutching her simple fabric purse. "I was just dizzy. The lights." "Excuses. You're making customers uncomfortable." That's when Reagan stepped forward, 24, with determined eyes that had seen too much loss too young. She moved between the elderly woman and her tormentors. Her jeans were faded, her canvas jacket worn at the elbows, but her voice carried the strength her father had taught her before his death in the line of duty. "She's not in anyone's way," Reagan said quietly, kneeling beside the trembling woman. "She's a human being who needs help. Can you see that? Or have you forgotten what kindness looks like?" The women exchanged glances, their faces reddening. "This is none of your business." "It became my business the moment you chose cruelty over compassion." Reagan's hand found the elderly woman's, steadying her. "My father taught me that protecting people isn't just a job. It's who we choose to be when no one's watching." The women walked away, muttering, and Reagan helped the elderly woman to a nearby bench. The older woman's hands shook as she tried to smooth her silver hair. "I'm Margaret," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of unshed tears. "Thank you. I don't know what came over me. I just felt so alone in all these people." "You're not alone now," Reagan said, sitting beside her. She pulled out a water bottle from her backpack, her police academy textbooks visible inside. "I'm Reagan. Take your time. There's no rush." Margaret sipped the water slowly, studying Reagan's face. "You're studying to be a police officer?" "Yes, ma'am. Following my father's path. He died during duty 3 years ago. Saved a family from a house fire." Reagan's voice caught slightly. "He taught me that the strongest thing we can do is stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves." "Your father raised you well," Margaret said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "I have a son, a successful son, but somewhere along the way, I became invisible to him. He's so busy building his empire that he forgot I exist beyond being someone to house and feed." Reagan's heart ached with recognition. Her own mother sat in a wheelchair at home, paralyzed from a stroke, dependent on Reagan's care. "I understand loneliness," she said softly. "I live with my mother. She can't walk anymore, but I see her. Every day I see her." Over the following weeks, they met for coffee, for walks in the park, for quiet conversations that filled the hollow spaces in both their lives. Margaret never mentioned her son's name, never revealed the mansion she lived in, the wealth that surrounded her emptiness, and Reagan never asked. She only saw a lonely woman who needed a friend. One afternoon, Margaret grew serious. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said carefully. "My son. I've told him about you, about your kindness. He needs to remember what goodness looks like." The meeting was arranged at Margaret's home. When Reagan arrived at the towering estate, shock rippled through her. This was wealth beyond anything she had imagined. A stern-faced man in an expensive suit opened the door, his dark eyes cold and assessing. "You must be Reagan," Declan Hartwell said, his tone flat. "Your mother speaks highly of you." "Your mother is a remarkable woman," Reagan replied, meeting his gaze steadily. They sat in a cavernous living room, Margaret between them, trying to bridge an impossible distance. Declan was 34, handsome in a sharp, untouchable way, his every movement precise and controlled. "I appreciate what you've done for my mother," he said mechanically. "I'd like to compensate you for your time." The words landed like stones. "Compensate?" Reagan's voice remained calm, but hurt flickered in her eyes. "I'm not your employee, Mr. Hartwell. I'm your mother's friend.
because she deserves to be seen as more than an obligation. I provide everything she needs. Except yourself, Reagan said quietly. Margaret's sharp intake of breath filled the silence. She doesn't need your money. She needs your time, your presence, your love. Declan's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about my life, about what I've built, about what I've sacrificed. You're right, but I know about loss. I know what it's like to watch someone disappear while they're still alive. Reagan stood, her voice gentle but unwavering. My mother can't walk, can't care for herself, but I see her every day. Not because I have to, because missing one conversation, one smile, one moment with her would be a loss I'd never forgive myself for. She turned to Margaret, whose tears fell freely now. Thank you for trusting me with your friendship. That means more than you'll ever know. What she didn't know was that her words had cracked something inside Declan. That night, for the first time in years, he sat with his mother, really sat with her, asked about her day, listened to her stories, saw the loneliness he'd created. Months later, Reagan graduated from the police academy. She wore the badge with quiet pride, not for authority, but for service. Known in her community for her calm strength and empathy, she treated every call as her father once had, with patience, fairness, and heart. One afternoon, she responded to a distress call from an elderly man whose own sons were trying to force him from his home after taking control of his property. Reagan arrived to find the old man trembling, documents scattered across his kitchen table, his sons looming with cold determination. "Officers, this is a family matter," one son said dismissively. Reagan listened carefully to the elderly man's story, reviewed the legal documents with meticulous attention, and stood firmly between him and abandonment. "These papers were signed under duress," she said, her voice steady. "And even if they weren't, this is his home. Family is not something to be discarded when it becomes inconvenient." She ensured his rights were protected, contacted legal aid, and stayed until the sons left, chastened and subdued. The old man wept with relief, gripping her hand. "You saved me. Not just my home, my dignity." Word of Reagan's compassionate service spread. Declan, transformed by her earlier words, had begun spending real time with his mother. He asked about Reagan often, and Margaret watched something tender grow in her son's eyes, respect deepening into something more. One evening, Margaret asked Reagan to meet her privately in the garden where they'd shared so many conversations. The older woman's hands trembled slightly as she took Reagan's. "I've watched you heal a broken family," Margaret said softly, her eyes glistening. "You restored dignity to strangers when their own children would have discarded them. You've kept compassion alive in my son, reminded him of the man his father hoped he'd become." She paused, choosing her words with care. "Would you consider marrying Declan? Not because of wealth or status, those things mean nothing if the heart is empty, but because love guided by integrity endures. Because two people who share the same values, the same commitment to doing right, they build something that weathers any storm."
Reagan sat in silence, her father's lessons echoing through her heart. She thought of her mother, of the partnership her parents had shared before illness changed everything. She thought of Declan, no longer cold but learning, day by day, to be present, to be real, to be kind. That night, Reagan sat with her mother, holding her hand as she explained everything. Her mother, unable to speak clearly, but her eyes bright with understanding, squeezed Reagan's fingers. The message was clear: follow your heart, but trust your values. After days of reflection on her values, her parents' lessons, and her own heart, Reagan invited Margaret and Declan to her modest home. Declan arrived quietly, uncertainty softening his features. Her mother watched from her wheelchair, witnessing this moment. "I've thought about what you asked," Reagan began, her voice steady but warm. "My father taught me that the best partnerships aren't built on perfection. They're built on two people choosing, every day, to see each other, to grow together, to protect what matters." She looked at Declan, seeing the genuine transformation in his eyes. "I've watched you change, not because someone forced you, but because you chose to. That choice matters more than anything." "Declan, Reagan." Declan's voice broke with emotion. "Yes," she said simply, a smile blooming across her face. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because of who you were, but because of who you're becoming. Because I believe in choosing a future built on respect, partnership, and shared humanity." Margaret wept tears of joy, embracing them both. Reagan's mother smiled from her chair, her eyes reflecting pride and hope. In that small living room, two families merged, not through wealth or convenience, but through the quiet, persistent power of kindness that had touched them all. They stood together, understanding that sometimes defending a stranger's dignity plants seeds that bloom into something beautiful beyond measure, a future where compassion leads the way. In a world that often values success over substance, remember this. The way we treat others, especially those society overlooks, reveals who we truly are. Choose kindness. Choose presence. Choose to see the invisible people around you. That choice changes everything, not just for them, but for your own heart, too. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.